Hey everybody, this is Vernier for Corners.com. So on November 9th, CR member DJ Cokes sent me a IM uh, over Gmail and told me that he is deep in the Stars Million. So I was like, sweet, all right, I'll sweat you. So I sweated him, and he ended up getting. I gave him no advice. I just watched. I've never. I've played a tournament before, but nothing serious, nothing over a $10 buy. So he finished up 182nd and ended up getting over $1,500 in prize money, which is awesome since he entered the thing on a kind of a whim, and he got in with a $1 satellite. So his return on investment obviously is through the roof, but Jan has played 5NL before this. So I was talking to him afterwards, and I was like, dude, you rolled for whatever you want to play, assuming it's reasonable. And him and I decided that he's going to be playing, he's going to move right up to 10 no limit. So he cashed a lot of the money out, left himself with $300 online, and now there's really no reason for him not to be playing 10 no limit, and with his new Robusto status. Now, like a lot of micro stakes players, DJ Cokes has a pretty good understanding of some of the poker fundamentals. I mean, he's watched Card Runner's videos, he's read the forums, etc., etc. But even if he posts some of the hands online, there's nothing like having a player who plays higher stakes look at your videos and try to find some themes in what you're doing. Some of the things you're doing well and some of the things you're not doing well. And posting to the forums is just not going to be enough. It's a good start, but sometimes you could be doing a lot of things which you don't know that you're doing incorrectly, so you're not going to post about them. And only having somebody watch that and kind of question that is going to bring those leaks to light. So I'm going to be doing a series of videos where Jan sends me a session that he's played, and I review it, send him some notes, and discuss some of these common leaks that he's going to have. So the way this is going to be different from most Leak Finder videos is it's going to be a series of videos where after each one he implements the changes, and we'll see what his progression as a player is going to be. So, but for now, he is Robusto, and he's going to be starting at 10 no limit and seeing what he can do. So here we go. We're at the tables. Throughout the video, I'm going to have little notes posted, and the Aqua notes are going to talk about general game management decisions. For example, sitting down with two shorties directly in your left, right off the bat, it's not going to be profitable. They're going to be able to shove on you a lot pre-flop. They're going to be able to float you a lot in position, and it's just not going to be a profitable thing. So when you sit down at a table, it's just like crossing the street. Make sure you look left first, and then make sure you look right. I guess some of our friends overseas, you got to look right first when you're crossing. But in the United States, you got to look left, and then you got to look right. Make sure no cards are coming. So same here. Look left first. See who is going to have position on you 5 out of 6 times. And then look right. See who you're going to have position on. But who is on your left is much more important than who is on your right, because the general flow of profit goes clockwise. So yeah, but not just one, but 2 short stacks on your left. This is something that DJ Cokes mentioned, but it's something that he didn't leave, which to me is a leak. All right, my next note is just a general kind of rule of thumb, is when you're in an early position, I would be raising to 4x and under the gun +1, because you're going to have strong hands anyhow, and it's going to allow you to play a lot of your strong hands You want to build a pot when you have strong hands. But in late position, first of all, you're going to be in position, so there's really no need to inflate the pot pre-flop. And second of all, by opening to 3x, people that are going to fold are going to fold anyhow. People that are going to call are probably going to call anyhow. So it's going to allow you to play a wider range of hands while in position. So I know even at the higher stakes, some people will min-raise the button. Some people will do 2.5x, which is just really annoying because it's an awkward size to 3-bet, and calling sucks because you're going to be out of position. So I would definitely consider raising to like 3x when you're on the button and in late position. Now up here on table 2, you have pocket sixes, and it's a hand that I want to talk a little bit more about. But I want to kind of address what you said in the video. So this is what DJ Coke said in his commentary, which I've edited out, so you guys can listen to me instead. He said, I have sixes in the big blind. I'm going to call because the raise from the button. I'm going to call the raise from the button in order to set mine because the guy has about the same stack as I do. Now, well, first of all, it's hard to see his stack because of the poker, the HUD display is over his stack, and that's another thing that I would classify as a game management decision, is kind of the location of your HUD. And the second thing is there's a lot more that we need to know about this player in order to make the play with the sixes. So I want to go into that next. So I want to talk about small pocket pairs out of position versus late position opens. And it's important to know the villain's pre-flop and post-flop tendencies. So this specific villain is playing 25-22-6. Now, calling just with the intention of set mining is definitely going to be a leak for us. But here's some of the things I would consider in order to decide what I want to play. So if somebody's stealing a lot, I would say 40% or more, then I would lean towards 3-betting them with the sixes. On the other hand, even if somebody's stealing a lot, but they're calling a lot of 3-bets, like 65% or more 3-bets, then I would lean towards folding more because they're going to be calling a lot in position, they're going to be floating you a lot, and sixes are just not going to play that well post-flop. On the other hand, if the villain has a very low VPIP, like 14%, and has a pretty high and has a pretty low steal rate, then I would definitely lean towards calling more because those are the villains that are going to have a pretty tight range when they open, and when you do hit, you're actually going to you've got a much greater chance of taking their stack if you do hit. Now, villains post-flop tendencies. If this is the kind of guy that's going to be continuation betting a lot of flops, I would consider calling and check raising a wide variety of flops pretty indiscriminately because they're just going to be raising a lot of hands, that they're going to be continuation betting a lot of flops, and they're just not going to be able to continue. And we can talk about the math involved in the profitability of check raising and things like that, but that's a little bit of an advanced topic, but definitely something to consider. But for now, I would stick with kind of these general rules of if somebody's stealing a lot, start 3-betting them a lot, but if somebody's is calling a lot of 3-bets, then I would just start folding more. Now the question is, right, so all we know about this villain is that he's 25, 22, and 6. Well, that's the other thing. I think these are things that you should definitely have in your heads-up display. You should have how often they're stealing, you should have how often they are calling 3-bets, you should have how often they're 3-betting, and you should have how often they're continuation betting. So all these things are necessary in order for us to make an informed decision. So back to the action. Calling just to set mine and then check folding the flop. I probably would have 3-bet this guy pre-flop just based on his VPIP and PFR. He's just going to be raising a lot. I would imagine his steal is somewhere 40% or higher. But on this kind of a flop, I have no problem check raising it. It's going to be so hard for him to continue. Like, he can't like a 7. Like, he'll never fold a king here. But I can represent a lot. I can represent a king myself. I can definitely represent a set. I can represent a flush draw. I can represent a straight draw. There's a lot I can represent. And now, the other thing to keep in mind is this is the kind of player that I can represent something versus. For example, if this up on table 1, this Nel D Matty Boy, he's playing 76-10 versus him. I would definitely not be looking to represent anything because he's probably not going to fold a 3. He's not going to fold ace high here. He's just not going to believe me. But this 25-22 player, he's definitely going to be considering the fact that, for example, I'm playing tight and I'm check raising this flop. So I think he's going to give me a lot more credit than somebody who's playing 76-10. So all that said, I think I would have 3-bet that pre-flop. But moving right along. So we have 8s. Definitely an open here. 40 cents, 30 cents. Again, I would lean towards making it 30 cents. If this guy was shorter in the blinds, if he had like $2.60, I would probably make it 40 or 50 cents. And the reason for that is, well, I think 40 cents would be okay in that case, because I would want to just give him an opportunity to shove on me pre-flop, and then I could call it off, and my 8s would fare well versus his range. Now, and this is actually a situation that's going to come in later. So there's 85 cents in the flop, or in the pot on the flop, and we're debating our continuation bet size. I think you can make it something like 55 cents. You don't have to make it a lot, as this is a flop that we would be betting a lot anyhow. So you make DJ makes it 60 cents, which I think is a fair bet amount. The turn is a 4 and doesn't really change anything. We have a couple of options. We can check behind here for pot control, but I prefer making a blocker bet. And the reason I prefer making a blocker bet is his most likely holding is a draw. Well, his holdings include kings, 7s, and draws. Now, if we check behind and the draw hits, he's going to bet, and we'll have a decision whether to call or not. But if the draw misses, then sometimes he'll bluff a misdraw, but more often than not, he's just going to check fold. So the only time that the two streets we can get value out of draws on are the flop and the turn. And this is something that DJ has consistently misapplied throughout the video, and will continue to do so. So it's something to watch for. But it's something that I think is reflective of how a lot of players at the micro stakes play the early two streets. So they're looking too much for pot control and not enough of charging draws. So I would actually bet something like $1.25 here. And I think he'll still call with draws, and he'll still call with a 7. So we're going to get value out of all that. I'm going to leave this hand alone for a second and go back up to this one. So there's a min raise from a player who's playing 76-10, small blind, big blind. I think ace-jack is a little bit too strong here to flat call. I would re-raise him pre-flop because I have position. He's going to be calling a lot. He's going to be playing third fault poker on the flop. And yeah, so I would make him like 70 up here. Very seldom is it going to be 4-betting. It's a very good flop for us, and this is one of the things I kind of, my next note here, and these notes in orange are going to deal with reads that I have on particular situations personally. So first of all, I think you almost always have the best hand And even if you don't, if you have something like tens or fours, like a 10 or a 4, then any ace jack or well, a queen will give us the nuts. But I think any jack is going to be good for us too, and any ace is going to be good for us as well if he has a king. So, in addition, you have position. It's small pot. It's a absolutely mandatory call. And this is the second theme that kind of emerges. One of them is playing your kind of made hands versus possible draws weakly on the flop on the turn and then strongly on the river. The other thing is just playing fit or fold poker. I see a lot of that players at the micros and low stakes doing that. They call with the intention of hitting. Well, more often than not, you're just not going to hit hard enough. And the times you do hit hard, the other player is probably not going to have a hand either. So I think calling here is okay sometimes, but then folding this flop is just criminal. All right, back down to table 3, picking up where we left the 8s off. The king comes, which is a great card for us, as more often than not, his most likely holding here is a 7. Well, it just makes it less likely that he has a king himself. I actually like flat calling here, and the reason for that is he'll have a missed draw so often that if you raise, you're just not going to get value out of that draw. So basically by raising, well, he never has a king here. Basically by raising, we're only hoping to get value out of a 7, which he might fold a 7 anyhow, so I just don't see much value in raising here. The only hands we might get value out of are like a 7, maybe 6s or 5s. 3s or 2s just got counterfeited on the river, as far as he's concerned. So we did have a draw, and in fact, I think a little bet on the turn would have been good. Now, if he shoves over a turn bet, usually fold because players like to play their draws passively. But then again, the 4 came, I don't think he can really represent much. Now, here's the next game management note, is up here you're sitting on $8.80. On table 2, you're sitting on $9.55. Make sure you're actively reloading, as will become apparent on why you need to do that when we look at this pocket king's hand. Queen 9, I think, on table 4, Queen 9 on the button, versus a player who's playing 12-7, and a small blind who's playing 19-19 with an aggression factor of 1. Mandatory open, make it something like 30 cents, like I said. So we have a nit who's playing 12-6. 12-6 with 0 aggression. Opens to 40 cents. This is definitely a situation where we want to be 3-betting. I would make it something like $1.25, $1.30 would be okay. $1.20 is perfectly fine. He snap calls. And this is a flop that we're definitely felting. I would bet something like $1.70 here, and obviously call a shove. I don't think you have to bet much because it's a flop that he's going to be playing. He either has a piece and he's going to shove, or he doesn't have a piece and he's going to fold. So by betting $1.70, you can bet it with a wider range. Although if I had ace king or ace queen in this situation, I would probably check fold this flop versus a player who's playing 12-6, because I don't expect him to fold. Obviously jacks he won't fold. I don't think he'll fold 10s, he won't fold queens, he won't fold 9s. He might fold like 8s or 7s, but he might also call with them because people love to put you on ace king. So if I had ace king or ace queen, I would not c-bet this flop. If I had ace queen, I would have not 3-bet him pre-flop. But it is what it is. So he thinks for a bit. And drumroll, he min raises. So mandatory stack off here. He could have a really wide range. He could have a jack. He could have queens. He could have pocket tens. When DJ's mouse started hovering over the fold button, I was screaming at my screen like, there's no way, like you cannot be serious. And I think I would have thrown up a little bit if you had folded there. You don't, which is good. But okay, up here on table 4, this guy named Master Bobo is playing 13-7 infinity. I think folding ace-jack here is not horrible versus somebody who's playing that tight, but the fact that he's raising the button and it's three-handed, I would definitely lean towards flat calling here. I think our hand is just a little bit too strong. I think 3-betting, I mean, it's not horrible, but I think it's the worst of our options. All right. We obviously hold. Get it all in. He folds. Now, on stars, you can click this little red button up here, and you can see what he had. He actually had ace jack, as we can see in the replayer, but DJ looks for the hand history later on, and he kind of goes through the complicated process. You can see it on the HUD, but you can also click this red button in the upper left-hand corner, and it will bring up kind of a stars replayer that they have built in. And you're going to be able to see what he had. But that's the reason we're just never folding over pairs in that spot, aces, kings, or anything. So this is a more cumbersome way of figuring out what he had. But like I said, little red button will do the trick for us. So add the micros, I just don't think. If he has jacks, he never has aces there. I think if he has aces, the way he called so quickly, I think if he had aces, he would have thought about it more. But if he has jacks or nines, or whatever that last, and there's like maybe a 5 on the flop or something. If he has any of those, you just attribute that to variance. You play the hand well, but as you can see, people will get it in with much worse. So again, queen jack, just make it 30 cents here. Especially against the short stack. He's going to be, I think he's going to be playing third fold. Yeah. Well, he's playing 81% of the hands. He's playing 81-44, so I would just still be making it. I would still be making it 30 cents. So here is our next situation, very similar to the pocket eights in that we have a made hand, which there's an overcard on the flop, and we think about how to play. So he bets 30 cents. So he leads 30 cents into something like 90 cents. Now, when he does that, this weak little bet is it's almost always going to be indicative of some kind of a draw. So here is kind of my read of this situation. Is weak bets by weak players on a draw heavy flop are usually marginal made hand or a draw. Now the marginal made hands you could have are like 5-6 or some kind of 9, or you definitely have 7-8. There's just a lot of hands you could have here, which he just wants to find out where he is. Now, more often than not, he's going to have some kind of a draw. It could be a goofy draw. It could be something like even like 10-8, which is unlikely because we have a 10. But I mean, it is what it is. But the two streets where you can get value out of a draw are the flop and the turn, unless the player is willing to bluff the river. So I would raise this up. I would make it $1.10. I'm very confident that I have the best hand. Now, the turn gives us an open-ended straight draw, and there's $1.40 in the pot. And once again, he bets 30 cents. And I think, once again, this is his situation. If he didn't raise him on the flop, I would probably put in like a reverse blocker raise here. I would make it something like $1.50 and expect him to call. If he has a flush draw, he'll call. If he has a straight draw, he'll call. If he has any kind of yeah, I would just put in like a little raise. Although I much prefer a raise on the flop than on the turn. But this is just so weak. I actually don't even mind a raise to something like $1.10 just because I feel like I'm ahead, and I don't feel like he's going to 3-bet me. And that's pretty important too. If a player has a tendency to just go nuts with betting and 3-betting, then yeah, I like a line of pot control, not on the flop, but maybe on the turn. But in this situation, I would probably just raise. And I think he thinks about it. $1.80, $1.30. Yeah, and he does raise, which I think is okay. So the guy flat calls, and now there's 385 in the pot. So flush draw gets there. The jack's actually not a bad card because it just makes it less likely that he has a jack. But I think he does have a. He either had a draw. If he picked up a backdoor diamond draw, then he obviously got there. But more often than not, he's going to have like a 6 or a 9 here. He might have an 8. An 8 would make sense because there's a bunch of like, if he had some like 7-8, then he picked up a gut shot. Now, on the river, because we think a lot of his range are missed draws and really weak hands, I would bet very small here. I would probably bet like $1.50, which is less than half the pot. But I think if he has a really weak hand, then he's only going to call a really weak bet. And I don't think this kind of a player is going to bluff raise you a lot on the river. So I think a bet of $3 is just too strong, and it's going to fold out too much of his range. So if you think they're weak, bet small. If you think they're strong, bet big. All right, pocket eights. We get re-raised by the short stack, and now we've got a decision to make. So yeah, so I'm going to do another PowerPoint presentation as it relates to making this decision. So in this example, we want to figure out how profitable is it going to be to play pocket eights. So basically what we want to do is we want to look at equity versus ranges. If we're going to go all in. So if we're going to go all in, it's going to cost us $3.25 in order to win the 5 cents that's in the small blind, the 10 cents that's in the big blind, the $3.65 that the villain has total in the stack, plus the 40 cents which we've already invested. So that's a total of $4.20. Now, if we look at risk versus reward, 325 divided by the total amount we stand to win means that we need to have at least 44% equity to make this call profitable. Now, I've given the villain a range of all pocket pairs above 6s, ace-jack suited, ace-jack offsuit, and above, and then king-queen suited and king-queen offsuit. And versus that range, which I think is a pretty tight range, we have close to 46% equity. In addition to that, if we start widening his range, then our equity is going to go up dramatically. So, I mean, if he's shoving with all pocket pairs, obviously our equity is going to go up. If he's going to be shoving with all kinds of like ace-9, ace-10 type hands, maybe even suited aces, ace-6, ace-7, all these hands are going to increase our equity because pocket eights are favored against all these hands. So I would say just as wild as the villain is playing. He's playing like 78% of the hands, raising 40% of the hands. I would say versus his tight range, we definitely have the equity, and I would just shove that hand. So even though this is pretty close, I would probably get it all in here. A lot of times these guys, especially somebody playing 78-44, they're just going to show up with goofy stuff, and you're going to be able to take it down. Now, up here on table 1, this guy who's playing quite recklessly just completes the small blind, and we have king-queen. And again, I feel that it's criminal to not raise him up here. I would probably make it something like 50 cents. But let's talk about what happens post-flop. So on the flop, we have a backdoor straight draw, but more importantly, we've got second pair with pretty good kicker. And it's a flop that we're definitely going to be going with here. Well, we're definitely going to be continuing with, definitely not going with. I don't see much value in raising here. I think pre-flop would have been better, but on the flop, he either has an ace he's going to continue, he either has a draw he's going to continue with. But there's a lot more aces than draws in his range. He could also have a weaker queen, but by raising, we're essentially overrepresenting our hand. I would much prefer to just take a more cautious approach. And in this situation, I would just prefer to flat call. I think now in other situations, even though there's an overcard, I advocate, I think, with the tens of raising the flop. But remember, there, people just tend to have aces a lot more than they have a high card like Jack. And there he led for a very weak amount, like third pot. And here he's leading for a much stronger amount. I think if we would have let for like 10 cents, I would advocate just raising him up. But he bets 3/4 pot. I'll just flat call. The turn doesn't change anything really. He leads kind of weakly. I mean, his most likely holdings here, he could have a draw, but he could certainly have a 7. Although his hand right now looks like a weak queen or a weak ace. And if he has either of those, he's probably not going to fold them. We're chopping. If he has another queen, we're chopping because the ace counterfeits the 7 counterfeits our kicker. So I would probably just call here again. He's never going to fold an ace, and obviously he'll never fold a 7. He probably won't fold a queen, so I would just look to flat call here. Now, the raise in some ways turns our hand into a bluff because we're over-representing our hand here. It's much more like, basically by raising here, we're representing the 7, because why else are we raising on the turn? I don't think there's enough draws. Basically, the only thing we're raising here that we're hoping to get value out of is a diamond draw, or perhaps a backdoor club draw that he picked up. And I don't think that's enough of a range to warrant raising. So he did end up with a backdoor club draw, but I still prefer a flat call on the turn. I don't hate a raise, given the way this guy's playing. Just kind of a reverse blocker raise, but I think there's much better boards to do it on. So yeah, I mean, basically the only thing that we could have hoped to gotten value out of is kind of exactly the hand that he did, which is a club draw. One of the things that you should be doing as well is you should be making notes. Now, this kind of a player, you probably won't see him again, so it's not necessary to make a note, but it's a good habit to get into. I would just double click on him, and um, the note that I would say is leads weak on turn, like with turned flush draw, and we know that he's not gonna be three betting it, so we can say lead. How would I say? I would say lead bet calls turned flush draw, and just kind of plays it passively. So whenever he's betting again in the future and he's kind of leading weak, it's gonna make me think that he's got a weak made hand, and I would be raising him. So this is why I also advocated raising him earlier when he bet 30 cents into the like 30 cents into 90 cents on the Jack 9-6 flop with two clubs. For the most part, I'm pretty impressed with your overall DJ Cooks' overall pre-flop ranges. Now there's spots where I would be raising instead of calling, and but for the most part, he's playing the right hands in the right position, which is good. So this player we seem to have a lot of interactions with him. I think Ace Queen, given how deep we are, I think flat calling is fine. So there's a situation earlier where he raised and we had Ace Jack, and I advocated re-raising there. But a couple of things are different about that situation versus this one. First of all, he's raising to 5x, which we have not seen him do before. That's a pretty big amount. Second of all, that one was small blind versus big blind, and even though he's a fish, he is raising in early position, so we have to give that a little bit more respect. So I have no problem flatting here, especially how deep we are. Now, a player who's played 0 hands in the last 8 hands makes it 4x, and Mad Boy flat calls. This is, especially since we're going to be out of position, even though we're going to be in relative position, Ace Queen just becomes garbage here. I think with Ace King I would have re-raised pre-flop. I think with Jacks I would have re-raised pre-flop. But Ace Queen in this situation, you facing a 3-bet by a relative unknown, but we do know that this is the first hand he's playing. I would auto pitch it. And DJ makes the right decision, which is really good. So if I flat called 10s, I might overcall them, and the reason I would do that is because I would have relative position. 10s and 9s I would probably overcall. I definitely wouldn't have the set odds versus Khrushchev, but 3-way, I expect everybody to play pretty honestly, and I think I would have the odds to set mine. So he does show up with aces. And although 10s and 9s, I think folding them is fine too, just because we don't think we're going to get paid off by Mel B, Matty Boy often enough to make that profitable. But that hand was played really well. There's really no other way to play it. The other thing about re-raising their pre-flop is, like we could see, he flatted the 3-bet with Jack 8 offsuit, and yeah, we have position, which is good. And I guess if our read is that he's going to be playing passively, then we are going to be able to get a couple streets of value in position. But the 5x bet just kind of, I don't know, it was weird. If I haven't seen something before like that, I'm just cautious to take the lower variance route. Now, this is something that I really like, and this is something that I think a lot of players have a leak in. in the small blind, you should take extra caution to play tight. In a hand like Jack 9, it looks pretty, but it's just not going to play well in a multi-way pot, especially out of the worst position. So if you get in the habit of folding hands like that, you're just going to be better off. You should be looking to play more nutty hands, like suited connectors, which can hit in more than one ways. Definitely suited aces, like up to ace 7, maybe ace 8. Now, here's a note. This is something that DJ said in the video. He said, sometimes I raise, sometimes I fold, if I want to mix things up a bit. So I don't think you need to be, quote-unquote, mixing things up at the micros. I think you should be looking at each situation, and you should say, well, what's going to be my most profitable move in this situation? And with a short stack on the button, and a fairly short stack, although a nitty one. So we have a loose short stack on the button, and the blinds are really not that fishy, but just because this guy's playing, the short stack on the button is playing 43% of the hands, I would be folding this. So I wouldn't be worried about mixing things up. I would be analyzing the situation. So small blind's probably going to fold. Big blind is probably going to fold. It's playing a very reasonable card owners type game. But this short stack on the button is going to restrict me from opening this. So again, going back to the point we made about table selection and not having short stacks on your left, I would avoid this situation altogether by just folding. And ace-6 is just not going to play well enough post-flop to make that profitable. Down here, up on table 3, we folded ace-4 suited to a under the gun open. I think that's perfectly standard. Up. Yeah, here we go. To a button open from somebody who's playing 14-14, definitely a standard fold. I don't think there's any reason to. I think ace-9 is just a little bit too weak to defend. Ace-10 suited and higher, I'd probably defend. Ace-Jack offsuit and higher, King-Queen out, probably defend here. King-Jack suited would be really marginal. I probably wouldn't versus this player. And this is actually a player, if he was any deeper, I would probably flat call with my, with like low pocket pairs because he's playing pretty nitty. But he doesn't have enough of a stack to have the right odds to flat call. Now, down here on table 3, we raise ace-king offsuit, and the flop is jack 8-4, it's rainbow. So, DJ decides to bet 65 cents into the pot. So, let's think about what that bet size accomplishes. Whenever you decide to bluff in a situation like that, it's a risk versus reward situation. So there's 95 cents in the pot, and we see that 65 cents. So we need him to fold. You take your risk, which is 65 cents, and you divide that by your total reward, which is the 65 cents which you're risking, plus the 95 cents which is up for grabs, and you get 41%. So we need him to fold 41% of the time to show an immediate profit. Now, you could call here and get something like, well, any ace or king, if it comes, we're probably going to bet again. But this player's playing 19-12. I do think that he's going to be folding often enough, and specifically he's going to be folding at least 59% of the time or more. So I do think that bet size is going to show an immediate profit. Now, If we would have bet more, I don't think his frequency is going to be affected by our bet size here. So I think if we bet 65 cents, he's either going to fold or he's going to call. And if we bet something like 75 cents or even 80 cents, he's still going to just fold or call. I don't think our bet size is going to make a difference. But the bet size is our, so if we bet 75 cents, we're risking an additional 1 BB, which is really going to add up. So on that kind of a really dry flop, you're just better off betting less. And as we could see, he folded right off the bat. So I really like the bet size, but that's some math that's behind why we do what we do. So I think an understanding of mathematics, just as it relates to risk and reward, becomes pretty important. Especially when you think about bluffing. Like if somebody's bluffing, if somebody's betting half the pot on the river and you think they might have a bluff, then figuring out how often you need to be right in order to show a profit. Up here on table 1, the Melby Matty Boy is limping again. I'd probably make it 50 cents. 40 cents is really not that bad. We almost always think we've got the best hand. If he would have raised, I think I would have just flat called. I don't hate a re-raise. Actually, given all my reads, I wouldn't hate a re-raise because we do have position. We're not as deep, and even though he's playing very loose, he's playing very passively. So we saw him flat call Jack-8 offsuit to a re-raise before, and he's just going to be playing passively. And if we re-raise, we've got position. We can fire if we hit. We can check if we miss. We can just really control the size of the pot and the way the action is going to go. So yeah, my initial thought was flat call, but I just remembered kind of the reads that I had, and I would lean towards 3-betting him. If he was more aggressive, I would probably just flat call. There's really no need to, I think I said this earlier, there's no need to increase our variance and just go nuts versus fish. But we do want to be aware of their ranges, and if they are, if we think we're ahead of their range, we should play accordingly. We shouldn't just call. We shouldn't just fold. And as we did earlier with the ace jack, when we flat called pre-flop with ace jack, the flop came king queen, I think king queen 4. I would, yeah, we're not calling just to hit an ace or jack. We're calling because we think we're best pre-flop, but we want to control the size of the pot. And in addition to that, we want to play some post-flop. Table 4, ace-8 to an under-the-gun raiser. Just dump it. It plays too weak. Even ace-jack suited to an under-the-gun raiser is just not going to play that well. Basically, we're hoping to flop a flush. Or a flush draw, or something like 2-pair trips. That's not going to happen often enough. Ace queen, I think, is just strong enough to flat call. Ace king, you can probably 3-bet, but your range just looks so, and like when you 3-bet a under the gun raiser out of the blinds, your range is just so tight. Usually the micros, it's restricted to, some people do it with jacks. I wouldn't do it with jacks, but it's restricted to queens, kings, aces, and ace king. So it's going to allow him to play, a smart player will play pretty perfectly against you in that situation. But now, on table 2, we have Jack-8, and we're on this. I think we were in the big blind, and we just checked check twice. Obviously we don't have anything, but we river an 8. I would probably lead this for something like 20 cents. And fold to a raise, but this guy bets 10 cents. It's a pretty weak bet, and I have no idea what he has. He probably doesn't have a flush. He probably doesn't have a straight. I think his most likely holding is air here, but because his most likely holding is air, I don't really like the river check raise. I'll probably just lead this for value myself. Yeah, we've got 2 pair, and our kicker's pretty good, but there's a very narrow range of hands that we're getting value out of. 10-8, 8-9, 7-8. I just don't think there's enough hands to warrant a river check raise here. I think it's overplaying our hand, and I think often we're just gonna get value owned. So I would lead this for value normally myself. Now, 4-2. I think this is a pretty important concept. There's 30 cents in the pot, and we flop second pair with a straight draw. Now, I would lead this for something like 20 cents. I wouldn't lead it for pot like DJ did, because people are going to play fit or fold poker anyhow. So if they have a good hand, they're going to raise this. If they have an ace, they're going to call. If they have a flush draw, they're going to call. There's just no need to inflate the pot out of position with a marginal hand. And we get popped to 80 cents by a player who's playing 18-9. So it's 50 more cents to us. Now, we have a draw, but it's a draw. No turn card will give us the nuts. And essentially, we're drawing, so even if a 5 comes, it's very likely that somebody could have a hand like 6-7 of clubs, which has a combo draw in this case. Drawing to a straight on a flush board is often also a leak, because anytime you're drawing to the non-nuts, it's going to be a bad idea. The second thing is we're out of position, and even if we turn a 4, we don't know if we're going to be good, because that guy could have ace-4, he could have pocket 3s. So versus his whole range, yeah, basically anytime you've got a draw, you should be more likely to leaning towards folding it more if you're out of position, and definitely lean towards folding it more if you are drawing to the non-nuts. So there, we're definitely drawing to the non-nuts. I would fold this in a heartbeat. But I probably would have let out for 20 cents instead of 30 cents. Again, just because he either has a hand and he's gonna call you, or he has a monster and he's gonna raise you. But good job, DJ. Arrives at the right decision in the end. I know he's thinking about it. He's trying to do the math, but I think just a lot of math goes out the window whenever you're not drawing to the nuts. So here's an interesting situation on table 3 where we raise ace-king in the cutoff and get 2 callers. Now, both callers are playing fairly snug. The small blind's playing 17-14 pretty passively, aggression factor of 0.5. And the big blind's playing 15-15 very aggressively with an aggression factor of infinity. So the small blind leads for close to pot. There's $1.15 in the pot pre-flop, and actually on the flop, and he leads for $1. So he leads pretty much for pot. This would be the bet that we would have made. And the big blind makes it $3. So drive your flop, drive your king high flop. There's a strong lead and a raise. So here's kind of my analysis of the situation. When player 1 leads, I would put him on either a flush draw, which is very likely since we ourselves don't have the ace of hearts. If we had the ace of hearts, or I guess my read would change a little bit, because then it's just he can't have the nut flush draw. But since we don't have the ace of hearts, he very well could have the nut flush draw. So I would say he might have like a nut flush draw. He could also have player 1 like a weak king, like a king queen or a king jack, which just doesn't like the texture of the board and is looking to take it down right now. If he has a hand like king queen, I think leading this is a really good idea, because right off the bat you're going to find out where you are, and you just have the best chance of taking it down right now. Now, player 2 raises, which to me it's insanely strong. I think he has a set here almost always. One of these two guys I think has a set almost always. I would say the player that raised it's much more likely. If he doesn't have a set, he has a massive combo draw. A hand like 6-7 of hearts or king queen of hearts. So, and we still don't know what what the small blind's going to do. So, I would, yeah. So that's my read on the situation. This guy has probably, like I said, he probably has a flush draw and or like a weak king. But this guy has a monster. The guy that's in the big blind. Now, here's what DJ said. He said, with my hand, I can never be folding this. We're going all the way with this one. I think there's some situations in 3-bet pots where you could definitely be thinking this, but in a single raise pot, facing a donk lead for pot and a raise, and both players are really, really tight players. That's what you got to look at. This player who's raising here is playing 15-15. He's just showing insane signs of strength. I would be folding my ace king here, because versus their ranges, I'm just crushed. So I'm either crushed. Actually, yeah, I'm almost always crushed. Even a hand like 6-7 of hearts has me. But we do call, and the turn is an 8, which is not bad. The river's a queen, but ended up this guy had quads, and he did in fact have a set. I'm kind of curious to know what Alzi had. I'm guessing he might have had a weak flush draw. I think if he had just a normal flush draw, given all the action, if he knows that we probably have ace king and this guy probably has a set, he actually has the odds to go with a flush draw, but I guess he didn't. So, alright. So here's some of the notes that I made for this video from overall play. I'm going to list some things that I liked, and I'm going to list some things that I would like you or DJ to work on. So first of all, pre-flop ranges were very good. He was raising the right hands in the right positions. I also really liked how much he was folding in the small blind. I think completing too much is going to be a leak. So folding hands like Jack-9 offsuit, definitely a good idea. For the most part, bet sizing was good when you were doing the betting. So I really like that as well. Also, DJ wasn't doing anything really crazy. So no like calling pre-flop in order to float somebody on the flop and just trying to quote-unquote outplay somebody. I see a lot of people do that, or just like check raising people there because you trying to run some kind of outrageous bluffs. I don't think that stuff is going to be profitable at the micro or low stakes. And honestly, a lot of people misapply it at the mid stakes. So people are much better hand readers at the mid stakes, obviously. So they're just going to be able to kind of figure out your ranges and things like that. But going back to the micros, doing nothing crazy, I think is going to be positive. Now, the big things that I think you need to work on are, if you think somebody's on a draw, then start implementing reverse blocker bets, betting the turn again, even with an overcard on the flop or the turn, because players at the micro stakes are going to be playing their draws pretty passively. So when you raise them, or when you bet the turn, they'll often just check call with a draw, and you can get value out of a lot of hands. So that's something I would like to see. Also, don't play fair fold poker. If you're going to be calling pre-flop and playing a hand passively, then you need to compensate with that by playing it more aggressively post-flop. That's something we'll definitely explore more later. But for now, basically, don't call just with the intention of set mining. Kind of like I showed with the pocket six hand. Have a better idea of what you're going to do. You know, either 3-bet, or if you're going to call, then check raise favorable flops, or float somebody, but don't look just to hit. Now, another thing is, I want to see more stats on the HUD. I want to see how often they 3-bet, how often they fold to 3-bet, how often they steal, how often they c-bet the flop, and how often they fold to c-bet. And there's actually one more thing I'm going to include on here. So start raising to 3x in late position and 4x in early position. Something I made a note on in the video, but I want to re-emphasize now. Alright, so good luck, and looking forward to seeing the next video. So for our card runners, this is Vernier.